Ladies and gentlemen, if I can have your attention briefly, please continue to eat. Sorry for the interruption. We're on a relatively tight schedule, so what we plan to do is introduce our next panel, and you just continue to enjoy your meal, and we'll move on with the program. First of all, I wanted to thank the ambassadors for participating in that panel session. Previously, it was a very good session. I was pleased to hear all the great questions, and of course the information we received from the ambassadors is very important. And I want to encourage those ambassadors to remember that we are an international city, and so if you ever want to promote your country even more down here, we have a great consular corps. I'm sure Dominik may have even spoken to you about it, but we have a consular corps here of honorary consuls from numerous countries around the world that not only take care of the citizens of their country when they have issues here, but they also promote business development in those countries. So I would encourage you to consider appointing an honorary consul here in New Orleans to promote your interests. So my name's Eddie Hayes. I'm on the board of directors at the World Trade Center. I'm an international trade attorney in town, and I also represent the city at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative in D.C., where I consult the federal government on issues of importance to the state and local governments when they're involved in trade negotiations. So it's a great pleasure for me to be asked to moderate this panel. We heard some great things about our ASEAN colleagues this morning, so now what we want to do is turn and give a little presentation on the great things that are happening here in Louisiana. We had a little bit of a hiccup in our history in 2005 with this hurricane, but since then we've really turned things around, and we're moving our city, our state, and our entire Gulf Coast region in a direction that I think we can all be proud of, and certainly all the folks sitting up here at this table share the responsibility and the accolades for that. And so I'm going to introduce them individually and have them give a brief, maybe 3 to 5 minute presentation about their organization, some of the issues that they're working on that may be of interest to our ASEAN colleagues. And while they're speaking, if anyone has a question or a comment, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. This is really informal. And then I'll just go down the line and ask everybody to address their current position on issues in Louisiana. So with that introduction, I'd like to start, of course, ladies first, and introduce Kim Marchand. Kim is the Vice President of Business Development and Marketing at the New Orleans Business Alliance. And she's primarily involved in corporate attraction, business retention and expansion, including retail attraction and the New Orleans Digital Entertainment program, which is something that's very unique here in town that I'm sure some of our colleagues in the ASEAN nations would like to hear about because it involves technology. I also want to just mention that I'm extremely impressed by Kim's bio because anytime I see the University of Chicago on there, I get excited. I pretend to be an economist in my off time, but I certainly don't have a degree from the University of Chicago like she does. So without further ado, Kim, please share the stage.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to meet with us from New Orleans and from the state of Louisiana. I am part of the New Orleans Business Alliance, and the New Orleans Business Alliance is the official economic development organization for the city of New Orleans. The way we work is at the state level, there's the Louisiana Economic Development Agency that looks at attracting and retaining businesses for the entire state, and at the GNO level, the regional level, which Matt will speak to, he looks at it for a 10-parish region, and for the city of New Orleans, we look to attract and retain and help businesses expand inside the city of New Orleans. We were put into place a couple of years ago, installed our president 18 months ago, and we're off to a great start. Some of the things we've done for the city of New Orleans since we were put into place was we are trying to make New Orleans a much more transparent environment for people to do business in. So we've taken steps to put an economic impact model together, some guidelines for the city to utilize so that they can objectively determine which projects it should support from like an incentives perspective, as well as now we are looking actually for the first time in recent history at putting together a strategic plan. And that's the one thing I wanted to note about what we're doing right now. We're putting together a 5-year strategic plan. We're working with all the stakeholders in New Orleans. About 75 people are part of a strategic advisory council. And we kicked it off a couple of weeks ago, and our goal is to have it in place by next spring of 2013. We're looking at 13 industry clusters, and we're going to whittle it down to focus on 3 to 5, where these are going to be the areas for the city to focus on in terms of helping to attract new businesses to the area, as well as help existing businesses stay and expand and so forth. So that's a big thing for New Orleans because it's a citywide plan, and the New Orleans Business Alliance is basically the facilitator of that. Separately, I've been given a nice introduction about what I do personally, and also we're looking at marketing and communications in terms of being the one-stop shop for people to come to as it relates to the city of New Orleans with regards to economic development data, growth, and other kind of demographic information. So that's what I have for now.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. You mentioned a couple things that I just wanted to address real quickly. What ambassadors and colleagues from out of town, what you're seeing up here is what has developed since the hurricane is a strong public-private partnership. These organizations are working very closely with their public colleagues, but also with the private sector, and it's a model that has been employed by various states in the United States, but we're really drilling down on that here in New Orleans. And one of the things that Kim mentioned that I wanted to just highlight is transparency. I'm sure you all know from your negotiations with free trade agreements or the WTO that transparency is absolutely essential, and that's something that we've struggled with in New Orleans during our history because we just do business a little bit differently here, and so transparency is something that we've tried to address. And I think Kim and her colleagues have done an excellent job, and it's not just in New Orleans and it's not just Louisiana, it's all over the U.S. Transparency is absolutely essential to have thriving businesses, and that's something that I know Kim and her colleagues are doing a really good job on. But one other question for you, Kim. As you're developing this 5-year strategic program, obviously you're looking at different sectors. Do you foresee any potential opportunities for investment from perhaps our colleagues in the ASEAN nations? Are there any industries that you think may be more appropriate for international investment or participation for that matter?
I'd like to answer that on 2 levels. One of the areas that we're focusing on, even from a cluster perspective, are the clusters are basically the industries such as manufacturing, trade and logistics, and so forth. But then we also see some cross-cutting goals that we're trying to figure out how to fit it in, such as workforce, education, and we see international trade as being an underlying piece to that as well. So we're examining how we would make an actionable plan to work through attract international business to the New Orleans area, but also we're looking at ways in which we could help local businesses expand and export with other businesses. One thing to note is, as we do our business retention and expansion, we find that many of the businesses here that are into international trade have a lot of trade that occurs with Asia right now. So we're looking at ways to build upon that as well.
That's a fantastic answer. Yeah, as you all probably know, that President Obama has engaged this national export initiative with a goal of doubling exports in 5 years, and we're taking that very seriously in Louisiana because we have a lot of small and medium-sized businesses that they do it and they get it. And it's funny because you would never think that small and medium-sized businesses would really be engaged in the international marketplace, but it's been quite surprising to see how many of our small businesses are doing that. So Kim, thank you very much for those remarks. Next, I'd like to introduce Kurt Weigel. Kurt is the president and CEO of the Downtown Development District. So I'm keeping it in New Orleans for right now. And Kurt's heavily involved with the New Orleans Bio Innovation Center, and of course, there's a lot of digital media things that are taking place in New Orleans, and I'm sure Kurt will address. But before I turn it over to him, I guess I have to mention now that he has a degree from the University of Michigan, which is an equally as good a school as the University of Chicago. So I have to give equal time here. I can't discriminate. So Kurt.
Thank you. We were having a conversation at the table before I came up about how the ASEAN nations are on their ascendancy individually and as a group, how that part of the world is really taking its place, its rightful place on the world stage, especially in recent years, and how much of that is related to the fact that so many of y'all have focused on education and creating a strong workforce in your various nations. I think that the specific example was, I think we can all point to, not to the detriment of any of the others, but Singapore, which we all know does not have a lot of natural resources, but has a lot of human resources, intellectual capital, and so forth. And I bring up that example because that, at the Downtown Development District, is our focus. We understand that economic development today is a very different business than it was 10, 20, 30 years ago, especially 30 years ago, which was when economic development was essentially about elephant hunting, identifying a company who you thought could bring your community lots of investment and jobs, getting that company to move, and then all the jobs would come with them, right? And we know the examples of that with the General Electrics and the General Motors and the Exxons of the world. But our approach, certainly downtown New Orleans, and I think as a city largely, is really focused today on attracting the talent first, understanding that like I mentioned, many of your nations, talent is starting to has driven your economy, is driving it more and more all the time. We recognize that here in downtown New Orleans as well. And so our focus has been on what we call industries of the mind, digital media, arts-based businesses, and biomedical businesses. And we think that what we've learned from looking across the world at the places that have been successful at attracting the talent and thus the jobs, the wealth creation, and the tax base that those bring, is that the places that have the high quality of life, that have the lifestyle, are the folks that attract the best and the brightest, because now more than ever, the best and the brightest can live literally anywhere in the world and do what they do. And so we've got to be about creating the right environment. So that's what we do at the Downtown Development District, working on simple quality of life issues about whether or not the street lights work or don't, to working with real estate developers to create the best public environment, or the best environment for private investment in real estate. That is our core, and just in the interest of time, I'll leave it at that, but would be happy to talk to any of y'all about what we do afterward. Thanks.
Kurt, you mentioned your focus is on talent first, and I think that's a very important concept. Some of you all may recall the phrase brain drain, which is something that we've experienced in New Orleans for a long time. Our best and our brightest have moved on, and they went to Houston or Atlanta or Miami or New York, where there were more job opportunities. And so one of the things that Kurt and his colleagues at the podium have been trying to do is to keep that talent here. We've got some amazing universities, Tulane here in town, of course LSU in Baton Rouge, Xavier, which has our pharmaceutical school. So Kurt, just real briefly, if you could, have you been working closely with the universities on some of these things, and have you found them to be open to assisting and trying to maintain some of that talent here?
For sure. Our organization was one of the foremost, I can say, in attracting the new academic medical center to downtown New Orleans. And of course, we did that hand in hand with the universities in order to make that happen. Also, I'll use this opportunity to tout something that I'm sure several of us up here could talk about, the fact that New Orleans has been named the #1 brain magnet in all of America, one of the best cities for young entrepreneurs in America, one of the best IT cities in America, all within just the last few years. And so I think that this strategy amongst all of us here at the table is starting to pay off.
Anyone have any questions? Any questions or comments so far? Okay, well, good. Thanks, Kurt, for that. We've covered New Orleans now. We're going to broaden into the 6-parish region. I think, Matt, is that right? 6 parishes? 10 parishes. All right, so we're going a little bit further outward. Matt Ruckert is the Senior Vice President of Business Development at GNO Inc. GNO Inc. is a fabulous organization based here in town, and they've done a lot of good things. And it's, again, a public-private type of partnership, and they're really focused on assisting their colleagues at the Department of Economic Development in Baton Rouge in attracting investment, maintaining investment, and in general improving the quality of life for the folks here in town. I would comment on Matt's university, but he doesn't have it in his bio, so I can't.
Louisiana Tech.
Louisiana Tech, okay, up in Ruston. So that's another great school. Matt, please.
Yeah. First of all, thanks everyone for being here. As he mentioned, we do regional economic development, which is kind of based on the concept that business and people don't necessarily identify with the same political boundaries that we set up as government agencies, and that it really doesn't matter where you are in relation to New Orleans politically, but that all you're trying to access is the goods and services and the power that collectively makes a community. And again, those don't really follow political lines necessarily. So we work with every organization within the 10 parishes, from community members to business leadership, local economic development groups like New Orleans Business Alliance, Downtown Development, Bio District. All of those organizations we work with to kind of bring everything together and synergize what's happening. I'll talk a little bit about how we organize, because I think it's important if you have a project or you have some consideration for an investment. We do business development and product development, which is a little bit different than most typical economic development groups. So what that means is the business development side is the stuff that typically gets headlines, the elephant hunting, if you will, the GE Capitals, for example, which are great projects and indeed should be celebrated. But more importantly, I think to economic development groups themselves, we also work on business retention with all of our local partners. We meet with about 300 businesses every year and try to identify issues that they're having and impediments to growth. And so that's one of those kind of aftercare things that economic developers don't typically talk about. They want to get the big guys in, and then they let them go about their business. But we're very focused on making sure that those businesses can grow once they get here. The other thing that's a little bit different is the product development component of our organization. That's the idea that we can only do so much with the sales-oriented approach, that we really have to dig down and improve the fundamentals of what it's like to do business in this place. So those are things like better policies at the state and federal levels. It's things like workforce initiatives that help make sure that once you're here, you can get the workforce you need to thrive. It's improving the brand. Everybody, when you got here, had a perception about what New Orleans was. It's not always accurate. And so making sure that New Orleans is branded as a place that's good for doing business. We make the joke, New Orleans for a lot of Americans is the city you want to date but not marry. It's a city now that has changed to a place where you can actually come here, you can do better for your dollar than almost any place in the country, and we've got to make sure that that message gets out. So that's another big component. And then access to capital. As people were doing things on the innovation side, which you hear a lot about, what's fundamental to every one of those? It's capital. And so we actually started a nonprofit startup fund, our venture capital fund called the New Orleans Startup Fund, that's an evergreen fund that takes no profit out of the system, but continually invest and will then reinvest those earnings back into more companies to do more things like that. And so I think the approach is one that you won't find around the rest of the country, and one that we think a lot about. But I would leave you with this. If you want to understand what economic development is, at the end of the day, what we try to do at no cost is to be a business concierge service. So any issue that you may have, any type of thing from project management to finding the right property, to finding the workforce, to finding an investment opportunity, the folks up here can help you do that. And we're more than willing to step up and do those sorts of things for you. So I'd encourage, if any of you guys are looking, make contact with any of us, and we'll help you individually.
Good, thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Yeah, please, Mr. Ambassador. Got a microphone coming to you.
Quite interesting presentation you give. I'd like to ask, you talk about capital. I know that this is a problem in many of the developing countries. Business want to start up, but there's no money. And people have good idea, they don't have money to start the business. And if they go to the bank, then you have to pay a lot of interest and stuff like that. How do you form this? Is it money coming from the government or from the private sector, or how do you do that?
Very good question. And just in full disclosure, we started the organization and spun it out, so we don't technically manage it anymore. We did the fundraising and the organization, and it's run separately so that we don't come into any conflicts of interest between economic development and funding. It needs to be very separate things. So just a disclosure there. But what we did, we took, again, an approach that's not out there very often. We were able to go raise some private funding, and so that people that believe that this would do good, and then writing a check to support that. It's incredibly important, and there's individuals that have the ability to do that. So we raised a good chunk of private money. The next thing we did was really looked at grant programs and some funding programs that were out there. And we were able to find some ways, and it had not been done, this funding that we used had never been done for this sort of activity before, but we were able to demonstrate that it was an allowable expense. And then we have to meet some very difficult criteria in the first funding round, but then as that progresses, it actually, the use of funds eases. So it's probably not an ideal thing for everyone, but when you struggle with capital, and banks across the world, it's not a New Orleans problem. Banks aren't doing as many deals anymore. Venture capitalists see so many deals that they have the opportunity to really kind of drill down into exactly the prototype of deal they want to find. And so we needed something bigger than that. And so it's really about thinking outside the proverbial box, and trying to identify ways that haven't been done before to bring capital to bear for these things. And you're going to have to figure out a solution that fits the community, but you gotta really push the boundaries.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador. I think the microphone did. Okay, that's all right. No, he'll bring it.
Well, listening to you and to the previous panelists, I get the impression that you don't really have difficulty or problems getting the kind of people that you need, technical people. Here, at least here in Louisiana, when we were with the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, well, this was a tour that we took. The ASEAN ambassadors were brought by the U.S. ASEAN Business Council to California, to San Francisco in particular. We heard one of the CEOs of top IT companies saying that they're short of 4,000 engineers and that they could not get these engineers in the U.S. And just wondering why. And of course, it's good for us. And he says, well, maybe we can get the engineers from ASEAN. And we welcome that if they would hire our engineers. But why is that? I mean, why would they not get, say, if you have no problem getting the engineers that are needed by your companies, why would they have a problem in California? I'm just wondering.
It's really technology workforce around the country, and I would argue in most parts of the world, are really taxed right now. The education systems have not caught up with the innovations of companies and the needs and the demands that these jobs are happening. I mean, even if you think about the technical ability of what used to be considered a low-skill or no-skill manufacturing workforce now requires ability to use computers, ability to think through problems, and all of those sorts of things. And it's really put a demand burden or a supply burden on the workforce here and in other places. So we've been able to offset those things really by creating solutions. We have not figured out a systemic approach yet. being honest. It's relied upon us working individually with companies on what their needs are and then trying to problem solve for them. So, for example, Gameloft is, if you got kids, you know the mobile video games. They're the second largest producer of mobile video games in the world. They employ about 6,000 people to produce those. Very in-depth skill set as well. And that job did not exist in New Orleans up until about 18 months ago. So there was no collection of video game developers that you were going to take from another company or get out of the university system here. Didn't exist. So what we did was said, we'll work with you on an advertising campaign, an importing campaign, and while we're doing that, we're also going to develop permanent systems that will begin training locals to take those jobs. So they've hired, out of the 160 they're going to put in New Orleans, they've hired about 40 of those. About 25 of those have been from outside the U.S. And they've brought them in. We've helped them with the immigration process, all of those sorts of things that are important to do. We've also been training locals to take those jobs. So it's about a holistic approach. And we talked to the folks in San Francisco a good bit. We actually outgrew them, as Kurt alluded to, in IT job growth in 2011. We were the #1 place. We added more technology jobs than any place in the United States. That's Boston, that's San Francisco, that's New York, it's Austin, Texas. We beat them all. So what that means is we're taxing the workforce we have, and we've got to think outside the box on how we're going to do this. And having good university systems is the first step, but having good relationships around the world where you can import talent from the places that are already doing it right is equally as important.
Go ahead, Dominik. Yeah.
Just to add one or two things, I mean, the shortage, you can see the shortage as well, because as you know, nationwide there's a PhD shortage, there's a shortage of engineers and things like that. And as Matt was saying, the educational system did not catch up with the needs of the industry. And frankly, I think also because being an engineer may not be as sexy than being a financial analyst or things like that. So that particular thing certainly is there. We got lucky, or we are lucky to be in New Orleans and to have all those other areas we experienced in the last 2 days would attract in the later years really young and bright people. And as said, with the different areas, the state, #1 workforce development program in the United States, for example, has the Economic Development Agency for the state, as well as smart policy by the state and the cities here, especially the city of New Orleans, and as Kurt were alluding to, make or have done a very dramatic change in a couple of years. And if you look at all the numbers, we're still not there yet where we want to be, but we certainly have done probably the most improvement in all the states in the United States, and really, if you would point an arrow, it's really going up. And so I just want to add those two things.
No, and Mr. Ambassador, one of the things we struggle with, not just in New Orleans, but in the United States, is our immigration policy. It's a serious detriment to bring in talented engineers and talented individuals from countries like India. India is one that we're constantly battling with at the WTO as they try to force the U.S. to increase our commitments in cross-border trade and services. And so it's something that we struggle with, but we're trying to work through it. There's the E2B program, which is something a lot of foreign individuals take advantage of, where they can come in, get permanent residence by establishing a business. So there's some unique programs, but it's a challenge, and I think that's a good point. I just wanted to mention this before we move on. GNO Inc., because it has such a broad reach, one of the things that I think is so unique about it is, and this is just my personal experience with it, there's no real parochialism with GNO Inc. They'll work with anybody, and obviously when they're working in other parishes or other areas, they have local economic development groups there, and so there can be turf wars. You might anticipate turf wars, but I think GNO Inc. has done a really excellent job of being a good partner with the various other organizations in the various parishes and throughout the state. And that's just my experience. But so anyway, thank you, Matt. Next, I want to move over to upriver to Baton Rouge and introduce to you Charlie D'Agostino, who's the founder and the executive director of the Louisiana Business and Technology Center, which is up at LSU, our flagship university here in Louisiana. The thing that I really enjoy up there is their small business incubator, which is part of the Louisiana Small Business Development Center, and it's a really unique program where they try to incubate new small businesses, and Charlie will give us an update on that. And Charlie's educational background is LSU all the way, both a bachelor's and master's. So without further ado, Charlie.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here and to address the group that we have assembled. We do quite a bit of things, and one of the things I want to mention is that at Louisiana State University is the flagship university, so we don't have any territorial bounds. We work very closely in New Orleans with Tulane University, with the Bioinnovation Center, with a number of other entities here, Xavier, and we operate a number of different programs in addition to our incubator program. Our incubator, on November 7th, will celebrate our 24th anniversary, which we'll be kicking off year 25 after that. And in the United States, there are very few incubators that have continually run for this long. So we're one of the granddaddies of the business incubation industry. And it's been working very well for Louisiana, and we've assisted other incubators start up. And of course, again, I keep bringing up the Bioinnovation Center. We work very closely with Aaron Misenich over there and Mr. McNamara in the district on helping and bringing our resources to work with clients here in the New Orleans area. The comment was made about the brain drain, which we've all heard over and over again. And what we did at the Louisiana Business and Technology Center was to establish a student incubator. And this student incubator is open to any university student, freshman through graduate school, with the hopes of helping them start a business, grow their business, develop the business while they're in school. So on graduation day, they do not have to interview for a job and leave and go to Dallas or Houston or Atlanta. They stay in Louisiana, and they have already started their business. We started this program 2 years ago, and we've had 11 companies start as these kids graduated, and they're currently employing about 35 to 40 other students and are operating full-time businesses. This is something we put a lot of emphasis in, and we're also working here in the New Orleans area with the universities here on trying to get this concept established. But the real reason that I'm here to talk on international trade and here with the World Trade Center of New Orleans and to be here at this forum is that we do have a number of international programs that we operate through the university. And again, it's a statewide effort. We have a program called Louisiana Going Global, where we help Louisiana companies look for export opportunities in your countries, and that we would actually look for bringing Louisiana companies to you so that you possibly could do some joint ventures, or they could actually work on some of the problems and issues that you may have in your country. The converse of that is that we have what we call a soft landing program. The National Business Incubation Association has designated the Louisiana Business and Technology Center as one of 13 soft landing incubators in the United States. And our focus is to give you and your companies that come in from overseas that want a spot in to tap the U.S. markets. We will give you a place to locate your business. We will provide translation services. We provide all sorts of different things, access to the university, access to networks, access to money, and kind of break down the barriers so that you can actually, a company from one of your countries could actually set up a U.S. operations with minimal trouble. And that program is working very well. We've currently got 3 companies, and we've got a company coming in from New Zealand, which kind of hits Matt's point about the mass. This is a video game company, and we have EA Sports, which is the big video game company in Baton Rouge that has 390 employees on my Research Park incubator property. And this New Zealand company found us through the soft landing program, and they want to locate near EA Sports. And so we've now provided a space for them to operate out of. Going back to the Louisiana Going Global, and I'll sum up with that, is that we are very interested in developing a relationship with each and every one of you. to where we can actually help U.S. companies make connections with companies in your countries, as well as to look at opportunities there for joint ventures that could go either export or import. So with that, Shannon McCormick, right here at this front table, she is my international trade specialist, and we've got two documents that kind of tell about these two programs I spoke about, and she'll have those available after the forum to distribute. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Charlie, any questions? That you raised some real. Oh, yeah, Mr. Ambassador, please.
I think it's a very good idea to set up that incubation system.
Right.
It's similar to what I've seen in California, Silicon Valley, the plug and play, and where they precisely provide incubation services for small businesses. But I was just curious, these 11 companies that were set up by the students, where did the capital come from for these new businesses?
What we did with this program is that we have, when the students are currently a university student, we charge them $25 a month to be in our incubator and to access our services. During that time, we bring in mentors, we bring in seasoned business people to help them formulate their business plan. We have counselors that work with them on their business plan. And we put together a program to where they could, depending on what type of company they had, what kind of money they may need to actually to start their business. And then we have access to angel investors. We have venture capital groups there. Some of them have actually gone out and got bank loans. But most of it is angel investors who put startup capital into these companies and help them get started. The interesting thing is that we run a venture challenge every year where we raise cash in the community, and we award 4 companies an opportunity to give a pitch and to compete for $20,000. Well, these student businesses, you know, a $5,000, $10,000 investment really can jumpstart them. And then as they get their business developed, then we can bring in other sources. But it's private funding. It's not any state grants or any government funding.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I just wanted to highlight one of the things that Charlie said, and I think he was referencing a New Zealand company that was potentially looking to come in to be near EA Sports. Is that right?
Correct.
And the thought just occurred to me that I guess we could call that a parasitic business. They're like a parasite. They want to just be near the bigger fish, and that's something that I think is important to focus on. We always tend to focus on bringing in the big company, and then, as I think Matt said, we leave them alone. There's no aftercare. But there's a lot of other businesses that want to be near them and do business with them, and that's something I think that we need to continue to focus on. So I appreciate that point, Charlie. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Jim McNamara. Jim, we're going to forget about geography. We're now going into a substantive area. We're going to talk about bioinnovation, and in particular the Bio District. Jim McNamara is the president and CEO of Bio District New Orleans, and this is something we're all very excited about here in town. And it was created more or less out of the catastrophe of Hurricane Katrina, I believe. We may have been talking about it beforehand. I'll let Jim elaborate on it, but the World Trade Center, we have a memorandum of understanding with them, so we're going to try and assist them add an international piece to it. But it's a really exciting project. So, and Jim, where did you do your college work?
Well, I'm proud to say that I come from the School of Hard Knocks. I'm one of 14 children, half brothers and sisters, and when it came to the time of college, my father said, "Good luck." So, but I did grow my first company, my grass cutting service, to be a local, very large lawn maintenance company. I started that at 11. My dad required me to have insurance and file a corporation, and I had to do all those things. So I learned entrepreneurism at a very young age. When you're 11, I remember my first insurance bill was $237, and my father required me to have liability insurance and form a corporation. It was pretty basic, but now I can form a corporation in about 10 minutes. My next company, I grew from $40 to managing over $100 billion worth of assets throughout the United States, and wrote several pieces of federal legislation. So you're only limited to how much you can dream and how much you're willing to work is the bottom line. So that's the school I went to.
No, that's a fantastic, wonderful
true-
success story.
Yeah.
Wonderful success story.
So I was retired and was on the Bioinnovation Center board. I was one of the founding members, and the storm hit, and my wife was trying to get me to go back to work, and then I'd taken off about 6 years. And if those of you that are in your 40s have a chance, take a break from work and take a little breath and understand and smell the roses while you're young. When you come back, the wheel will still be there and you can get on. And the bottom line was that, much like Kurt alluded to, we needed to rebuild a lot of things, and we needed to rebuild the University Medical Center and the VA, both under construction. We were short of funds on the Cancer Research Center. I helped raise the additional dollars there, and the incubator was short of funds, and we're able to go in the legislature and get those funds. So now we've got a district created that was created the month before the storm, sat dormant for a number of years, and all of the people here participated in kind of deciding that that's really what we wanted to do, was get this district up and running. We have a finite geographical area, and the legislature also gave us a statewide mandate. Well, that's too much to take on. Bottom line is that we found out that our universities have incredible technology in certain areas, research and scientific research, that we can actually compete globally. We are one of the best at infectious disease. We have incredible nanotechnology and drug delivery. If you take ambient CR, the CR portion of that is actually a Xavier discovery and something that they worked on. And I noticed in the bios of some of the ambassadors, we've decided that this is really a collaborative world, that bioscience is about collaboration. And one of the first things we did was to reach out to Tufts University. And I think the ambassador from Brunei was a Tufts graduate, and one other, I think, went to Tufts. Well, we now have a collaboration between Xavier, Tulane, and Tufts that's ongoing. And we're looking at some technology there that's pretty phenomenal. And the key thing for us is to reach into Boston, where the dollars are for bioscience. And rather than me try to make an appointment, let me go in with my partner, Tufts, and let them make the appointment, and I'll just ride on their coattails. Right, Charlie? That's what business people do. So it's an exciting time. I think that there is areas, we call ourselves a bioscience district. We've named ourselves that as opposed to medical, because we are looking at everything from manufacturing to informatics to translational medicine, the ability of being able to hook someone anywhere across the world to a researcher. I'm Irish American, 100% Irish. There is no university research at local on my heritage. That's probably going to be found in Boston. It's probably going to be found in New York, probably going to be found in Dublin. How does my doctor at Touro find the person doing the research on me? Conversely, who is doing the research on Asian Americans? It's not going to necessarily be found here. And so as we do this, we're going to have to speed up that. It's called bench-to-bedside translational medicine, and we want to be the home of a significant part of that. Let us be the hub. So collaboration is very important to us. We do a lot in workforce development. We are looking to gain some access into all the markets across the world. So I look forward to individually working with you and your staffs.
Exciting stuff. Anyone have any questions for Jim? Jim, when you find that research on your heritage, let me know. I'm 100% Irish.
There you go.
So I'm going to ride your coattails.
Well, unfortunately, I have my wife's cousin as an example, and I'm going to tell the story very briefly because everyone has had this in their lives. She's 26 years old. She's an athlete. She suddenly comes down with a rare liver cancer. So she goes to a local doctor, doesn't know that particular cancer, refers him over to MD Anderson. Nobody there was studying that particular cancer. Ends up at Johns Hopkins, he had a buddy in India doing the research. So she had to find the money to go to India to have research, to have the surgery done on her in India. That's the kind of world we live in today. The specialist for that particular rare disease or cancer of the liver was being done in India. Well, that's great. but how do we make that connection? And we have research here that I guarantee you'd be interested in, because some of the research we have here is very relevant to small populations.
That is a phenomenal story. I mean, that truly is. And for us to perhaps be a hub of that type of information, I think would be astounding.
Yep, exactly.
But that's a wonderful story. I'm glad. Hopefully she's improving and doing okay. Yeah.
She unfortunately passed, but
sorry
you know, it was a story of, here's an application for Louisiana's digital media tax credit that we haven't taken advantage of, that we have now focused on. Today is Friday. Wednesday, I signed a collaborative agreement with a group called HISMIS, the Health Information Management System Society. It's a worldwide society. We have formed a collaborative agreement with them where they're going to actually help us in workforce development and bring that technology to New Orleans. And that's going to be the kind of stuff that worldwide gets us to connections.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jim. Any questions? Okay, last but not least, Dominik Knoll, who you all know that I don't need to introduce, is the CEO of the World Trade Center here in New Orleans. I know Dominik has numerous degrees. I think one from Innsbruck, is that correct? Yeah, and definitely one from Tulane. So he's a graduate of our A.B. Freeman School of Business. So Dominik, please tell us about what's going on at the World Trade Center and internationally here.
Thank you, Eddie. I said I will be brief. I mean, you saw what we do, and we're very happy to host such a distinguished guest as we have today, and all of you. Really, I want to say, just before I make my brief remarks, we work together very closely, all of us, and really this panel should be just to give you guys an idea of how innovative and how different really Louisiana is, or in certain areas different Louisiana is from other places you have been. You see it in the French Quarter, and it goes on with some of the mentality as well as some of the new things we try to generate. I want to just say a couple of words. I said we're a statewide organization. If you go out here, I would like for you to remember that we are doing everything related with international trade, such as those events here, as well as helping our members with some of their needs. That could be when there's some legislative, maybe not in the right way, or some issues, as well as some success to report. We work very closely together with a variety of stakeholders, from ports to oil and gas companies to also newer companies or newer initiatives as digital media and things in that direction. I wanted to point out something that Louisiana, if you think of population, Louisiana has a very small population. It has 4.5 million people as a population, so you know, similar to Singapore or small population. We're 25th actually in the whole United States as of population-wise. To give you a story of that, I showed up in my shorts, tried to look for a new apartment. It was a Saturday, and then I was in shorts, and I come there to a gentleman who had an insertment in the newspaper, and so went there, and he was in shorts, and we liked each other. Said, okay, I'll move in here, and he said, okay, that's good, coming in here. Turns out it's that gentleman here, so he's my landlord.
I knew when he asked me to be on this panel, he was going to ask for
he wants a rent deduction.
Yeah, right.
No refund.
So what I mean with that is, even if we're small, it's very easy to get access to the different people you actually need to have access, as well as to talk to mayors and the governor and the different things you need. They're very in front of you, and you can have a very easy access, and the people try to help you out in every possible way. Nevertheless, I read you a couple of other statistics who I think made interest of you. We're right now number 7 in terms of export value. So we're 25th in terms of population, but we're number 7 in export value with $55 billion done last year. We're the leading, or our port. There's a huge port complex with 5 deep water ports. The Port of New Orleans, as we discussed yesterday, is the number 4 in the United States. That leads up to have a lot of rubber. We're the leading U.S. port in rubber, the leading U.S. port in coffee, the number 2 in steel imports. To give you another statistics, we're the number one in foreign oil imports. We're the number one in liquid natural gas terminal volume. 60% of the grain comes through to the Mississippi River. So you see there's a small population, but there's a huge importance in terms of international trade in this state, and that has also to do when you look at the World Trade Center. We were founded in 1943. It was the first World Trade Center in the world, and now you have 300 around the globe who work better or worse. But so there's a huge history with it, and then there's a huge history of international, and so that's what I want to bring across. I have a couple of other statistics, just because the statistics, when you read them, they're quite nice to, it gives you a good overview of things. And I said we have, as we heard already, number one in digital media statewide, number one in economic growth potential, number one in exporting states, number two in tax competitiveness. So again, that brings me to the point back, as we discussed earlier. It's very important to create a framework with government and city so that the businesses can do actually their job and they're not actually held back by certain frameworks. I know sometimes in the United States that on a federal level that may not be the case if you look at certain free trade agreements who should have been passed a little bit earlier than they have. But as I said, number 5 in best business climate and number 2 in job growth. So those are really some very great statistics to talk about. If I would point out one specific area or one area in our field we work on, and again, we heard a couple of other areas, but one area I want to point out to is energy, because again, our 3 biggest exports are oil and gas, chemical, agriculture. But if you look at the energy, we produce right now 25% of the natural gas in the United States will be or is produced right now in the state of Louisiana. That's huge. That is very, very big. And once we talk to foreign folks who want to come here, they all say that in the energy area we have a huge advantage, because if you need a lot of natural gas, for example, to do fertilizers, chemicals, all those type of things, we have all the resources here to actually be on a global scale competitive. That means we have the natural gas, we have the infrastructure, we have the pipelines, we have the sites, as Matt was talking about, as well as we have the access through the rivers you need, and on top of it, you have a very favorable government and state and city and parish approach to those type of industries. So with saying that, I said I would conclude to say that it was a pleasure to host the different people here, as well as we want to make sure that we will follow up and we will talk internally, and I think we will see a delegation going to Southeast Asia with our representatives, because we really want to keep that dialogue open, and we really want to make sure that businesses are connecting and we can do some win-win situations together. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the aftercare that Matt was talking about, right? We want to make sure we maintain the dialogue that we've started here. Two quick things. Dominik mentioned natural gas. We're actually exporting natural gas out of Lake Charles, Louisiana now. We're I think the first company to ever obtain an export license to do that. And I understand maybe there's some hiccups with another license ongoing, but we're going to be exporting natural gas. Of course, the natural gas market is pretty tight right now. It's pretty flooded. So, but certainly that's going to be an important thing going forward. The other thing I wanted to mention is Dominik has spearheaded the creation of what is called the Mississippi River Coalition, which is a partnership between the World Trade Center here in Louisiana and our colleagues up the river. So Memphis and all the other organizations up the river, because we all face common issues. And so when you talk to the World Trade Center Louisiana, you're really talking to a whole coalition. So we all share the one thing, which is the bounty of that Mississippi River that's so important to us and to our nation. And so Dominik has done a really good job of trying to broaden the package that we deliver as an organization. So I wanted to compliment you on that, Dominik. So I want to thank all the panelists for some excellent presentations. I wish we had more time, but certainly come visit them after the break. And I want to thank the ambassadors for those great questions. One housekeeping note before I turn over the podium. Those of you who are going to be involved in one-on-one meetings, please go over to the Jefferson Ballroom. They've got your schedules there and your packets of information for for your meeting. So thanks again to everyone on the panel.
Good job, good job. All right, man. Take care. Good seeing you.